Hello there, and you're very welcome to the very first episode of Music As, an interview series where I'll be chatting about the role music plays in our lives. I'm Louise O'Connor. I'm an Irish fiddle player, but my background is quite varied as you learn about me as we go along. So I'll be joining the dots between music and all kinds of things. And I'll be talking to people from different walks of life also. I'd love to hear from you, the listeners, as well, about what you describe music as and what your relationship to music is. Maybe what tunes, albums, or songs have helped you through the last year. We're in February 2021 right now, and in Ireland, we're in lockdown number 3. So for me, I could talk about music as sanity really over the past year, and I'll be sharing some of my own stories with you also. You can follow at Music As Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and you can get the podcast on all the usual platforms. So you can follow, subscribe, and rate it. And that would be great. And or you can get it from my website, louise.ie. So I'm delighted to introduce my first guest, the renowned Donegal fiddle player and singer Mhaonaigh. In reviewing her solo album Immel, Paul O'Connor described Mairéad's voice as one that carried with it a charge that reached the heart every time, something I'd certainly agree with. He also argued that although she's one of Ireland's most successful and well-known traditional musicians, there may be a general lack of awareness of her as a soloist, a composer, and an artist of great depth and profound knowledge of her art form. She's toured globally with Alton over the past 30 years, as well as playing with a number of bands. Her musical accomplishments are too many to cover here. She's an exceptionally warm and humble person. She lives and breathes the Irish language and the music, and as she told me, her particular approach to music is how she survives day to day. I'm so grateful to her for sharing her story so openly with me, and I learn more from it every time I listen to this chat, and I hope you gain a lot from it as well. I encourage you to check out her brand new single Ray on Chullis, Ray of Light, on her Bandcamp, which was written to inspire hope in these difficult times. And she also teaches fiddle lessons online, and all her info is on mairéad.ie. So now, to open our chat, we have one of Mairéad's compositions on Grianstad, meaning solstice. Thank you very much, Mairéad, for joining me today. How are you doing up there?
My pleasure. I'm doing fine here in the wilds of Donegal on the edge of the Atlantic.
Yes.
Very well, thank you very much, and
Great.
delighted to be with you.
Yeah, I'm so delighted to have you here. I heard you described before as periods of recession being times to look inwards. It made me wonder how has this year been for you? How has the lockdown experience been?
Yes, the lockdown experience has been very, initially I was very frightened and very afraid, and came back from mid-tour in the US, and then gradually it became a reflective time and a very beautiful time, actually. Again, learning from life that sometimes these dark periods of life brings great beauty into your life and makes you reflect and think about prioritizing and what the world is all about, or what your life is all about. So it was, although it has been a very sad time because we've lost so many people due to COVID, it also has been a very good time to focus inwardly, as you said, to focus inwardly at what really matters in life. And in the music, it made me more creative and made me play more music, actually, eventually. I've done a lot of creating, and I've also been inspired to create more. So that's been very important to me.
Yeah, it's wonderful you were able to make use of the time like that, and you couldn't be in a more beautiful place up there for inspiration.
Well, yes, because initially, if you remember the beginning of lockdown, we were all asked not to go too far away from our homes, was it 3 kilometers or whatever.
Yeah.
So I was very lucky because within those 3 kilometers, I have miles and miles of beaches.
Wow. So you're like, no
So
problem.
I had I had beaches to myself every day, and the weather was glorious. And the song, the bird song was actually more beautiful than ever. I felt they were singing at the height of their singing careers, Every morning I woke up to birdsong, and I just felt they were rejoicing in life. And I said, if they're able to do it, why can't we?
Amazing. Yeah.
And every little hint from nature gave me a great solace, and helped me out of my fear. And incredible how these little things can mean a lot.
Absolutely. So the topic of this project is music as, so talking to people about their relationship to music and what they would describe music as in their life. So you mentioned their music as solace, and even the music from birds,
Yes.
As solace in itself, That's
Yeah,
really
well,
nice.
I mean, isn't that where music came from? We were trying to emulate nature around us and what we had in our vocal cords, I suppose.
Yeah.
And also, how basic it is to our spiritual need. If we're open to it, how it can heal, how it can actually caress your most inner part and make you readjust your focus to realize how beautiful life is, even though it can be very, very frightening and it can be very dark, that it can bring you to that higher place where the mundane doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have leaned more into music this year than ever before. I feel for that kind of solace and that kind of just help with dealing with difficult emotions.
Yes.
As well. And
I think if we are open to the world will pay back more than what you expected. If you're open to this, to nature, and of course music and nature are intertwined as far as I'm concerned, and both come from that realization. It's going back to what it really is all about. And music actually gives you a vocabulary that actually words can't give you at all. And I realized that years ago when my late husband, Frankie, died, that actually the music was saying it all while I wasn't able to explain it verbally. The music actually explained or had an experience within it that had a healing power.
Yeah. So music was a huge part of your healing process.
Yes, and it still is. To me, music is what people call prayer. Other people would call it medicine. Sorry, there's a cat here. Other people, to me, it just brings you to that higher place that we all are seeking. And sometimes it's more intense than other times. It's all to do with focusing on that higher place. And if you feed your soul, we'll say, or if you feed your inner being with these joyful things, that it can actually be the healing that you need.
Yeah. And that healing, Mairéad, was that, did you find that most in playing or composing or performing, or in all of those things?
And all of those things, maybe in front of thousands of people, I would garner that as part of my healing, because most of these people didn't know my background and didn't know I was going through a loss or maybe a bad day. Nowadays, it might be just a bad day. And what you do with your music is you garner all those things that matter to you and give it out as love. Like I garner my very limited talent, as I see it. No, but it's really strange. It still amuses me that people think I'm a great musician or a great singer. I'm passionate about singing. I'm passionate about touching people and communicating the limited attributes I have and give it out with love. And that's how it's a sort of a spiritual process. It sounds kind of, to me, saying it out loud sounds very affected, and I'm not at all affected. I don't like to make people think that I'm above the ordinary. I think this is ordinary. I think this is the way some people survive from day to day. It's how I survive. It's how I survive on tour. I use it as a spiritual moment.
That's amazing, Mairéad. And when you teach music now, is that something that you try to convey as well, this kind of more spiritual aspect of the playing?
Well, maybe I do it more subtle. I just like to make it joyful and show the generosity of, for instance, in my palette in my music is traditional Irish music. So let's say I'm an artist and my palette of colours is traditional Irish music. So I garner from that, and my inspiration has been the older musicians, most of them being men, of course, who were most of them gentle, inspired people with great heart and generosity. And that's what there's an old saying in Irish, and rud the chi leanu ní leanu, what a child sees they do. So I just use the inspiration of the older musicians, how they inspired me, and try and give that to the people that are learning from me.
You mentioned before the musician Tommy Potts and how he said to you, that story?
Yes, I was very, very shy as a musician, and of course this musical spiritual life journey is always, it's a building block. Every little aspect of it, every step is a building block. And when I was a young teenager, I was in college in Dublin. One of my first meetings with the older musicians I had painted a painting for Tommy Potts, the great Dublin fiddle player, because Cardias na Vidlery that we set up in Donegal wanted to acknowledge these musicians that came before us, that inspired musicians over the years. And I try and dabble in drawing and painting, and I had painted a painting for Tommy Potts, and I brought it to him, to his house in Walkinstown. And on the night, along with me was Ciaran McGee, who set up Cardias na Vidlery. I think Paddy Glacken was there, the great fiddle player from Dublin and Donegal, and my late husband Frankie Kennedy, who we were just going out together. So we went to Tommy Potts' house, and Tommy, I think he had just lost his wife about 6 months prior to this. So he was still in a grieving place, but he took out the fiddle and he started playing. I think it was the Bunch of Keys, the reel, but it was like the most heart-wrenching slow air. He was playing a reel, but the tears were tripping him. And, he stopped and he was chatting, and his whole philosophy of life was just incredible. And then he asked me to play a tune, and I was so embarrassed. I thought my music would look like nothing, or that I couldn't play in front of such a genius. So he said nothing, and we went to the bar, to a local pub afterwards. And when he had me on my own, he said, "Do you not realize that this music has nothing to do with you?" And like, that would matter to me. I loved meeting that man.
Yeah, I love that idea of like removing yourself from it.
Yes, well, that's what I suppose in our, in our worldly state, that's what we're trying to do every day, is removing myself from this situation, and it's very hard to do, because we're all involved in certain things, and it's a learning process. And if you look at Eastern religion, it takes many lifetimes to learn to do this. In our religion, we try and be generous and think of others and treat others as you would treat yourself, trying to be, that we're all one. I suppose, it's all very, 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 every day is a learning experience. And every time you do the same thing, like, for instance, playing the same tune, like a tune I learned when I was 15, completely means something else to me now. Like, there's so much else involved. It's a little bit like reading beautiful poetry that you read all your life, and every year it brings another little lifetime experience into that poem. And the poem will mean something different to you as it will to me, because of my experience, and your experience is different. So these things repetition is very important, I think, and going back on, especially on music, these older tunes that we think, oh sure, I know that, I won't go over that, but when you play them, you realize, oh my God, there's another depth there. There's another layer of experience there, if you're open to it, and this is where I come back to that language, where it gives you this vocabulary that you haven't a word for it, but it's in the music, hidden there, and you acknowledge that, but you can't actually put a word to it,
Yeah, I suppose coming back to music as an adult, it can be very challenging, and that inner critic is very active, and your instrument can be nearly something to beat yourself with. So
this is where you have to come to the I suppose this comes with age, where you kind of have to accept yourself as yourself, and you have to accept your music as your music, and that is good. I mean, your music is as good as any other person's music, and this is where we have to actually accept ourselves. And it's a very difficult thing to do, because our inner higher standard beats you up.
Yeah.
But sometimes, if somebody turns around and say, that's beautiful, accept that, just imagine somebody said it's beautiful, that it has given solace to somebody, that it has lifted their lives. I think if I do that to 1% of my audience ever, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
It's just, if something speaks to someone and they're good enough and kind enough to say thank you and that was beautiful, just accept it, that they actually said that to you. We don't accept, I feel we don't accept these lovely gestures that people, especially the positive gestures, we would hold on to the negative gestures quicker than we would to the positive.
Yeah.
Because we know the positive is good, but we're very self-critical, and we seem to hold on to the critique rather than the positive.
Absolutely. That's the daily challenge as well, isn't it?
Yes.
To focus on the joy and steer away from the self-criticism.
Yeah, but also from to the joy from others. We seem to not hold on to when somebody is generous enough to say something joyful to you, to hold that more on a higher pedestal than if someone turned around and said, well, that E string was out of tune, it sounded crap, you know. I mean, I'm just talking to you as an ordinary musician as well, who just, if somebody criticized me, I'd be devastated, and I am devastated whenever I get a critique. But it's a learning process, and it's, you know, it takes years and years and years to overcome that. Isn't that sad that somebody would say something like that to you, instead of, because I would never say that to somebody else, even though I may have heard it or something. I would try and choose what was nice about that tune, what was nice about that person, what was, you know, what joy did I get from what energy that person played. Like, if they didn't play very well, you might have got nice energy from it, or you might have felt they did their best. And why not say that, you know?
And it's amazing how much we can kind of just dismantle ourselves early by taking on criticism from other people too deeply, or just, you know, criticizing yourself, you know, in an ongoing kind of way. You can just lose connection to the joy so quickly with that kind of,
let's say, one of the worst musicians you've ever sat with and said, well, they were really nice and there was something nice in their music, or they had a nice style, or they did their best. And, you know, I think we can be very basic sometimes instead of rising above. And the whole thing with music is we're supposed to rise. It brings us to that other place where we are equal. We're all equal. We all have something to give. We all contribute to this art of traditional Irish music. Let's say we all contribute in our own little way, no matter how basic we are or how complicated our music is. Everyone has something to say.
And it's something, we touched on it before, like music is something that can transcend gender and political divisions. And you've talked a little bit about that.
Well, especially in Donegal, when I started playing the fiddle, like, I'm 61 years old now. So when I started playing the fiddle in the late 60s, 70s, there was hardly any women playing fiddle or any music in Donegal. Like, young girls my own age, I didn't meet any for years. But I never actually looked at it like that. So I looked at the music as being genderless. When I played music, I never thought, I'm a girl playing the fiddle. I never, ever thought of it like that. I'm playing the mountain road, or I'm playing the oak tree. You know, it was never a gender thing at all. And I always felt genderless when I'm playing. You know, the music is another aspect where it brings you to an equal stage with other musicians. And I always felt, even playing with fellow male musicians, that I was equal to them, that it wasn't, oh, for a girl you're all right, or anything like that. Like, you do get that in the music, you know, there is discrimination sometimes, but most of the time you're looked upon as an equal, and it's usually the better musicians that do that. It's usually people that are bickering, that are kind of trying to get to that first step up, you know, that are critical, or that are finding themselves. They're the people that have a problem with gender or race or color, or, you know. But the very people that have gone through and have perfected their art usually are totally above all of that and don't see gender. They just listen to the music and appreciate the musician as a musician, not as a girl fiddler, boy fiddler, anything fiddler, you know?
Yeah, it's like getting to that kind of pure experience of music, I guess.
Yes, like I think
it doesn't matter where you're from or male or female.
Yes, it should be kind of, you know, blindfolded and let just people play and let people listen and let that be the yardstick where people say, oh, that's a great musician, you know, not how if they're women or men.
Blindfolded sessions. You could be onto something there. Right.
Yes.
The next step. Yeah.
The next thing.
I heard you describe the landscape in Donegal and the Gap of Dreams album. You described that as being influenced by Donegal fiddlers and the landscape around there. So
yes. Yes, the fairy music, you know. And the older I get, I used to think, oh, that's all highfalutin and metaphorically and all of this. But these people believed in the fairies. These people actually would tell you they saw the fairies, that they had partaken in their, you know, that they got their music from this other world. Yeah. And, you know, the older I get as a musician, the more I realize the dimensions that there are there. That we are so limited with our three-dimensional world that we get totally engrossed thinking this is reality. Yeah. Actually, if you look at science, it's not reality at all. It's an illusion. And the time is, you know, it's all to do with perspective. And, you know, my time is different to your time. And, you know, it's all an illusion. So, I mean, these people were more in tune than we were, and like people still laugh and say, oh yeah, the fairies and all, but that's just words. Like it's to do with this otherworldly place where you go when you create.
Yeah, so taking tunes from nature or
from the wind,
the other world, you know, however you describe it.
It's blowing in the wind.
Yeah, and like that kind of acceptance of another world is kind of deeply ingrained in the Irish language as well, isn't it? It's
definite. It's so, we were so in tune with other dimensions long ago than we are. Like our illusion of it being just we're here and we're gone. I think I've questioned this all my life, and the older I get, the more I realize we don't know anything. Our what would you call it, perspective of life is so simple, is so simple to what it really is. It's so multi-dimensional that we don't realize. Our brains can't actually comprehend how complicated this universe is, you know. So I say it with great confidence now that, you know, prior to electricity, when these older musicians were walking the bothrines of Donegal, you know, in that mist of rain, they saw shadows. As far as they were concerned, they saw ghosts, they saw fairies, but they were tuned into, you know, we would laugh at that and say, oh yeah, they're fairy tales, you know, they're little kind of fibs, but they sensed another dimension. And that dimension opened their, you know, from this very poor existence, they realized that things on this life is just basic, but that there's a bigger thing there to work towards. There's more hope there than we realize. There's like it's just opening all those, let's say, portals to other worlds, you know.
Yeah,
that's the Gap of Dreams.
Yeah, those tunes are portals, like, when portals to that kind of world view. Like,
Yes, if you if you listen to Paddy's Rambles through the
mm,
park, it's a beautiful air. Paddy Glacken has it on his album. Dermot Byrne has it on his first solo album. You can YouTube it. It's a beautiful piece of music. But again, this came through a dream, you know, and the dream is so important to a lot of Indigenous people. Like if you go to Australia, the Aboriginal people, they talk about dream time, and that your life is a dream time. Like, I mean, we feel that we're living in a solid world. And if you look at a rock, you think that's solid. And next thing you realize through science that it's just a lot of energy,
mm,
and I find that this quantum thing. And I've read a lot about all of that,
mm,
trying to kind of come to some sort of understanding of why people live and die young, and is there another life after death? And I think it's a lot. I think it's basically what most people think about, but when it comes close to you, like my husband dying, it really is something that you pursue for a while and try and understand and try and say, is this the end? Is there, like, I always feel that he's close to me, even though he's not in my world anymore, like in my 3D world. But I always find little hints that Frankie's close to me. And the same with my father, who died a few years ago. So it's just, I think a lot of people would think I'm off my rocker, but but I think we all look for these little hints in life to try and be able to bear these losses and to be able to understand why we're here.
yeah. I think looking to our elders and to the Irish language, you see so much of this other world connection. I think it's such that mixed with the music and the old songs. It's such a rich history lesson, but also there's so much learning to take from it.
Yes, and if you listen to a lot of Aisling Yall, for instance, Aisling are like dreamlike. A woman comes to the poet in his dreams. She's a spare van. They call her spare van, which is a beautiful woman, but literally spare van is a woman from the sky. She's illuminated. She's the most beautiful thing in this world. And those Aisling then became political because when the English came, they were metaphors for Ireland. So Roisin Duch would be an Aisling at some stage. Dark Rose Lane, So you have all of these Aisling, which is a state of a dream. And they were very, very, like, they used those as love songs. Like, initially they were love songs, and then it became political because the Aisling stood for Ireland and the dream of our freedom for Ireland, But prior to that, the pure sense of Aisling was for love.
Beautiful. Well, I think that's a lovely place to leave our conversation, Mairéad. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks a million, Louise.